we can get going now.
All right. Sounds like we have success.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are so glad you could join us for our Google Hangout today. Today's topic is inventory.
I can just swing this off the screen, right?
Yep. All right. If you haven't muted your microphone, please mute microphone and utilize the chat feature when you have a question.
All right, here we are, librarians at just the mere mention of inventory. I don't know how many of you are feeling like that. I am, because I've been out sick for a couple weeks. But I'm glad to be back and talking about inventory with you guys. So it's not as hard as you think. It's just a step-by-step process, and you'll be glad that you took the time to do it. So inventory has a couple purposes. It actually gives you a better snapshot of what is actually in your library. What it physically does is it reconciles the physical items in the room with the records in the online catalog. Therefore, when you use the features in Destiny, you can rely on them to give you accurate information about your copy count, the percentage of your library that's fiction versus nonfiction, how many titles you have in any given Dewey area, and so on. This is what it does, because a library collection is a living, breathing thing. Books disappear, books get worn out, and the collection changes, and you add items. So doing an inventory clears all that up for you and makes Destiny an accurate tool. If you never do an inventory, or you do an inventory only partially, your catalog becomes a less and less useful tool over time. So a couple tips before you start inventory, and throw questions in the chat. Lisa's monitoring the chat window, and we'll come around to those questions, because that is the purpose of today, is to answer your questions in case you're about to start inventory for the year. Couple recommendations. There is a report you can run that helps you batch update the cert type of your ebooks in your collection from cert type regular to cert type ebook. So here's the thing. One of the key features that Destiny uses to conduct inventory is circulation type. It looks for items in the circulation type that you indicate when you set up the inventory. Ebooks, when you purchase them, no matter who you purchase them from, if they send marked records to us to load in the catalog for you, they will be set to circulation type regular. In Destiny, circulation type regular equals print book. So print books are supposed to have a barcode. Therefore, if you set up an inventory of, say, your fiction, circulation type regular, you will see items added to your lost list that you didn't scan the barcode for that title. Ebooks don't have a barcode. They're going to come up on your inventory list as unaccounted for, and you can accidentally set them to lost and therefore accidentally delete the marked record that connects your catalog to the ebook. So every year when you buy ebooks, you need to update the cert type and run this report and go through the steps. So instead of going through those steps today, if you need that directions on how to update that cert type, you can do one of two things. You can email me, and I know that's the easiest thing to do. It is also in the Destiny Helps on the resource page of the LMS Google site, and it's called Batch Update or Update Cert Type.
So we had a quick question about this. If you didn't run the ebooks report before you finalized the inventory, is there a way to go back and change that?
It depends on what you did when you finalized it. If you made the choice set all unaccounted for lost, then those ebooks are now on the lost list. If you made the choice ignore the lost, I forget how it's worded, the other choice is basically don't change anything, then nothing happened. You scanned the barcodes in that inventory that you set up, and basically you changed nothing in Destiny. In the end, you didn't tell Destiny anything. If you finalize, unless you finalize the inventory and set what you could not find to lost, you haven't really affected your catalog. You've just kind of gone through the motions. So it depends. If they're on the lost list and you haven't deleted the lost, you might be able to go through there. You could also try the batch update and see if it'll pull them off the lost list. I'm not positive, but it might help that. So you could give that a try first and then look at the lost. If you've deleted your lost, they're gone. The good news is the Mackin ones still reside on your Mackin via shelf when you access it via the app or the web by clicking the tile in the portal. You just can't discover them by title, author, or subject through the catalog. Did that help?
Yeah, she said they don't show up as ebooks in the list of the lost, but I haven't deleted the lost. Go ahead and try the batch update and see if that works.
Yeah, try that. And I'll send that to you by email rather than going through that process. Or we'll do it at the end if we have time. Another thing you should do just to get it done is to clear up your in-transit list. That's under catalog and receive. In transit is the status that books are put in when Library Media Services catalogs them for you, and you're mailing them back and forth to the Pony. It's the only way they get on the in-transit list is if we catalog them. So this means when we buy those books for Booked on STEM and catalog them here, they're in transit. When I send elementary schools the Families Read Together title, it's in transit. If you pull a bunch of books off your book fair and send them in a box to us for processing, when the ladies do them, they land on the in-transit list. So the reason it's important to clear that up is that's one of the only statuses that conducting an inventory doesn't affect it. They won't get accidentally set to lost, but they'll just sit there as in transit. And if a patron looks up a book and they see the status as in transit, they may not come and ask you, what does it mean in transit? Where do I look? They may just skip it because it doesn't say available. You need to receive it on your in transit list, or when you get the box of books from Library Media, run them through check-in and it'll take them off the in transit list. It's just a good habit to keep that list cleaned up. I help schools, and there's 10 years worth of titles on the in-transit list. Now, it'll automatically take that book off the in-transit list if someone asks to check it out. So when books have been sitting on in-transit status for 10 years, that means you bought them, had them processed, put them on the shelf, and nobody touched them. Because if they brought it to you and asked to borrow it, it would have taken it off in transit. But scanning the barcode in an inventory doesn't take it off of in transit. So it's a good idea just to clean that up. You should clean it up when you get the box of books back from Library Media. Just check them in, and it's done. But if you haven't, checking it before you do inventory is a good idea, just to keep that cleared up. Because those books are counted in your copy count, in your statistics about how many fiction you have or how many whichever section of Dewey. But you don't really know if you really have them or not, because the inventory skips them and automatically counts them as available. So you could have got the books in, put them on the shelf, titles got lost, and you have no idea because they're sitting in transit status, and they will stay there forever because inventory won't touch them.
So Jennifer had a question saying she started her inventory and many books are being scanned, coming up saying, based on the options selected, this item is outside of the current inventory.
Okay, so let's keep going and look at how you set up an inventory, and then what you'll have to do is look at your parameters. Either you set them too narrow, or you maybe you did the sublocations. Let's go through it and look for what you did, Jennifer, and it may tell you why you've got it set to where you're not communicating with Destiny. You're scanning books that you think are in that range and they're not. There's a couple reasons why that could happen. So let's just go through the basic steps and then we'll come back to that. But that's a very common question. That's what happens to people. So some setup tips. Create a name that describes what parameters you set up for the inventory. This is for your reference only. Destiny could care less. It doesn't read it. It doesn't know what you named it. You could call it peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't know. Naming your inventory FY20 fiction is helpful to you, but that's not the step that tells Destiny what your inventory. Okay, so the name's important for you, but Destiny could care less what the name is. So make it something so that when you look at that to pick from, you know which range you set it up for. Cert types you need to pay close attention to. Destiny keys on two items. The third one is sublocation, but we can eliminate that. The two main characteristics Destiny is looking for is a call number and the cert type. And then, of course, it identifies the individual book by the barcode number. But the parameters are set up by cert type and call number. So you need to know that regular equals print book. That's how all of our vendors are told to send them the MARC records to make it come up cert type regular. That's a print book. And you should just leave it cert type regular. So when you're trying to do just your print book inventory, that's one of the main things you look at is the cert type. You don't want to use cert type media tablet and so on. So we'll look at that in a minute, but you want to do that with intention. Unless you have very carefully and consistently set up and use sublocations to describe your collection, leave them all checked, including the box that says undefined. Sublocations have to be kept up at the local level, at the school level. Vendors do not send things in automatically sublocated to match what you've set up at the school. So we've talked about sublocations a couple times, and we can talk about it again at the end, but unless you have very carefully and with great intention used sublocation, just leave them all checked. Which that could be one of the reasons that happened to you, Jennifer, was outside the range, maybe. You'll have to go back and look. There is a checkbox next to check shelf order. That's really helpful in the sense that, and it's optional, but if you fill that box, if you check it, Destiny will tell you when you've come to a book that's out of, it's in the range of the inventory, but it's out of Dewey order. So if you're doing fiction A through AAC, and you scan a book that's AAF, it's going to say, ding, this book is out of order. That's just a thing to help you find things that are not shelved properly, and you can move them to where they're supposed to be. It can be helpful when you're kind of mindlessly going through and scanning barcodes, because you may find books that are way out of range, like a fiction book that's should be in fiction D something, and it's sitting in the A's because the kids, put them anywhere they want. And it helps you correct that. It can also be annoying if your shelves are really super messy. So it's up to you, but it does help you find those odd things that Johnny told you he turned in that Rick Riordan book. But what he actually did was he took the Rick Riordan book and he stuck it in Fiction A, because that was the first shelf he came to. And so he didn't return it so you could check it back in. He shoved it on the shelf, and he shoved it on the shelf in the wrong place. If you're doing a fiction inventory, that Rick Riordan book is going to come up in the range. It's going to be happy with that because it's a fiction. And it's just going to keep going. But you might not notice that, hey, here's a Rick Riordan book. It's out of place. Maybe this is, the book I've been looking for. So it's up to you. It is a useful little tool, or it can be, annoying. You can always turn it off if it just slows you down too much. Maybe another idea is to kind of put your shelves in order before you do inventory. Come on, here we go. All right, so here's where things usually get goofed up. Destiny keys on call number and cert type. And this is each of those ovals is a capture of the first choices in setting up your inventory. If you leave those boxes blank, you see the message there? Destiny wants to inventory everything in your library. All the fiction, all the nonfiction, and if you don't set the cert types, every single cert type. So all your Chromebooks, all your equipment, all your ebooks, all your AV material, and your fiction, and your nonfiction. So you probably usually don't want to leave it blank. So an example of a nonfiction inventory of just one section is the middle one, 500 to 599. You can do nonfiction inventories in little chunks if you want to. Do a little bit every month so that you have a smaller range to hunt for lost in, and you can get that inventory quote finished quicker because it's a smaller number of books. If you want to do all your nonfiction, you want to put 000 to 999, and that will do all your nonfiction. You want to be careful to also put the cert type regular, and that will be all your nonfiction books. If you don't do that, it'll be all your everything. If you use weird numbers for your Chromebooks, it'll do your videos and all that. The third example is fiction. All you need is F to F. You do not need FAAA to FZZZ. If you want to do all your fiction, it's F to F. Okay, so once you click start new, meaning start a new inventory, what happens in Destiny? Immediately these things happen. Okay, you set up your inventory, you pick your range, you pick your cert types, you leave the sublocations alone, you click start new. Destiny immediately does this. Everything that was unaccounted for last year and left unaccounted for stays there. Every copy that fits the parameters of your inventory and is in the status available before you touch that button, on hold, they immediately, now this is kind of twist your brain, but everything that was status available suddenly becomes unaccounted for. Okay? Because that's what you're doing. Destiny is zeroing it out, so to speak, and saying, okay, account for these things. You said you wanted to look at all your fiction, F to F. Okay, everything is unavailable. Now prove to me it's available by scanning its barcode. And each time you scan, it goes to accounted for and back to available. Okay? That's what you're doing. It's taking what you said you wanted to look at, and it's temporarily making them unaccounted for, and then you're going back and fixing that by scanning the barcode and saying, I've got this one, I've got this one, I've got this one. Anything that was accounted for that fits in the inventory but is checked out, loaned out, which we don't really use, on order, out for repairs, or look at the yellow highlight, in transit, they remain accounted for. Okay, they're not going to come up in the lost list. They're not going to come up in the unaccounted for list. So check out a load of books before you do inventory. That's less you have to scan. And Destiny goes, it's okay, they're accounted for because I got a kid's name that says they've got this book checked out. The other thing that doesn't happen is that last one. Copies that were marked lost last year in your inventory, or they were marked lost because you manually marked them lost, a kid admitted they've lost the book and you set it to lost, they stay lost. Okay? Previously marked lost remains lost. I think I typoed that, and not unaccounted for. So that's why people have, when we look at their lost list, they have books that have been on their lost list since 2009, which is the implementation of the Destiny system, because they just stay there. The only time they come off that lost list is if you encounter them on the shelves within that inventory and you scan the barcode, it will pull it off the lost list. But otherwise, that list stays there. So anything that's still on the lost list when you finish doing your inventory is probably still lost. Whoops. Okay, so scanning the barcode, I kind of already talked about this. You'll see the 10 most recent titles scanned on your screen so you can keep track of where you are. If there's a problem with that copy, you'll get an alert message at the top and it'll tell you this was previously checked out to Johnny Smith, now it's been set to available. Johnny Smith previously paid for this book. An inventory, a refund has been generated. So you'll get messages when you scan the barcodes. But it basically tells Destiny, I found this one, I found this one, I found this one by scanning the barcode. If the copy is on the shelf and it's checked out, it will check it in. And it'll probably give you a message that says it was checked out, but it'll just check it in, which is a good thing. Because kids all the time, they bring back books and they shove them on the shelf instead of putting them in the book drop because they get mixed up. So now you're hounding that kid to find that book at home and actually it's sitting in the library. So now you've found it and solved that problem, which is great. It will automatically create a library fine for a lost book if you have it set to automatically assess loss for overdue. It will, if it's 25 days overdue, if you have it set to assess daily fines, it will create that fine. You should take that off because we don't charge daily late fines for books. But if you don't have that turned off, it will generate that when you check in that book and it's been sitting on the shelf for 2 years overdue.
So Jennifer, this is a good question. So after inventory, do we need to delete the lost books?
Yeah. You do, but let's talk about like how we could do that in segments so that it's not too soon.
Absolutely.
All right, so after you have set up your inventory, you should submit your collection to TitleWise. It'll give you an updated analysis.
It's super easy to do. If you follow the steps where you see the numbers 1, number 2, number 3, it'll just go and it'll give you a nice report.
And then you go to TitleWave.com and you can see, pick your report and view your analysis. Now, but we need to go back to Jennifer's question. Before you submit this, you need to consider your loss list. I guess we were just going to go to Destiny Live for this. So, so we're going to use Grassy Waters. Is David online today?
David is online today.
Thank you, David. We're going to use your collection because it's very nice and clean, and the sub-locations are real easy to understand. So thank you for letting us use your collection, even though we didn't ask in advance. Okay, back office, I'm in inventory. I'm going to start new, and don't panic, David, because at the end I'm not going to create it. Start new. Remember we said to give it a name that makes sense for what you're inventorying. Fiction FY20. Call numbers F to F. We'll do all of my fiction. I click update on my cert types. Here's where you can narrow it down, because if I don't uncheck big books, I need to be prepared to go in the back room and scan every fiction big book. But I just want to do the books circulating to the kids in the main room. So I am going to clear all these, and I'm only going to select regular. Okay, it's not going to do easy because that's E to E, call number again. So I'm going to have it on regular. I'm going to say okay. Here's where you can update sublocations.
Oh, it's not showing.
What happened?
I'm not sure. Jennifer said I was supposed to be able to see what you were talking about.
Oh, I've got stop sharing on my screen. Why isn't it doing it?
I'm not sure why. You should be able to see it. Can you see? Kimberly said she can see it. All right, Jennifer, if you can't see Destiny, I'll walk you through it tomorrow. I'll give you a call tomorrow. And most people can see it, so we're good.
Oh, okay. So we can have a whole nother conversation about how you use sublocation, and if you're particularly a secondary school, and you've decided to genreify your fiction, that's a whole nother conversation, and we can use sublocations to help you be able to do your inventory by genre and so on. But we're not going to get into that today, but we can talk about that, or if you have a genreified collection, you can give us a call. This is where, for now, I just leave it alone, and then you won't have any out of range things. Just ignore it. That's what leaving it checked on undefined, and you'll be fine. So the last choice is all copies meeting the above criteria will be set to unaccounted for, except copies that have been seen on or after today. So you don't want to set one of these up and you don't plan to use it for a month. You want to set it up the day or so, the day you're going to start using it. Because what it's going to do, if I clicked OK and set this up, it would account for everything that's checked out at David's school from today and before, okay? And going forward. If kid checks it out, it's going to add it to accounted for, okay? So you usually just leave that date. So that's kind of the setup. So then I'm going to say no, because David doesn't want my inventory. I'm going to do cancel, see if that'll go away. When you have to have no inventories open to be able to view your lost. So here's David's lost. He only has 229 books on his lost list. That is not that bad. I've seen a lot worse. These are all from, looks like, let's see, we can sort by date lost. It'll take a second. And this is what, to Jennifer's question. When you finish the inventory and you finalize it, you should check the items that are unaccounted for, that list, and try to figure out if you missed anything for any logical reason. And then you should go and try to look for them, and if you scan the barcode, they become accounted for. Once you've really tried to find the lost, you should consider deleting all the lost up to the current year, for example. Like if I was doing this in May, see how David's are mostly May of 2019? So I would, in 2019, last May, I would have left those sitting like David's done. And this year, when I do an inventory, I would say, okay, I'm going to let go everything. I'm going to delete all copies marked lost on or before, and I'm going to use that May 31st, 2019 date, because they've been sitting on the lost list for a year, and I've done another inventory, and they didn't show up. So I'm going to clean up everything that's a year old. So that's a fairly cautious way to do it. You are welcome to delete your lost at the end of the inventory. As long as you've looked at the unaccounted for and you want to go ahead and delete everything, some of those lost books will come back from they're lost in aftercare, the kid that admitted losing them and you set it to loss, you bring it back, they found it under their bed, whatever. So it doesn't hurt to leave them sitting there for maybe a year, but after that you should clean it up. We have found loss lists with 8,000 items on it, and it just becomes meaningless because those loss count in your total number of books in your library. So if Title Wise says you have 18,000 books and you have 8,000 on a loss list, you really only have 10,000 books for the kids to use. So you want to keep the loss list kind of small, and you want to keep it up because those are all counted. They're counted in the, the percentage of fiction you have, and you let that list get too big, and your other statistics for your collection are not accurate by thousands if you let it get out of hand. See, David's is in really good shape because he's just got, basically last May's and some from January. So I hope that answers your question, Jennifer. You want to delete all but the most recent ones and let it cycle for about a year. If you do inventory, it looks like David does inventory in May pretty consistently. If you do inventory every May, then delete everything from the previous May's inventory that's been sitting lost for a whole year. Now, according to district policy, school board policy, we're to inventory our collections in a 3-year cycle, 1/3 at a time. Now, that rule was negotiated and put into board policy, I can't even tell you how many years ago, probably 20. Our collections used to be ginormous. High schools had 30,000 to 50,000 print copies. And elementary collections were larger than they are now. And so it was difficult they were taking the clerks away, as you well know. Lots of you don't have clerks. High schools used to have 3 media specialists and 3 clerks. We're going down to 1 media specialist and 1 clerk. So to balance that, they changed, because the state law is the entire collection is inventoried annually, and that's still in state statute. So our policy is you get to do it in thirds. So 1/3 this year, 1/3 next year, 1/3 the following year, and then repeat. So this only really works if you do a significant third of the collection every year, like fiction, nonfiction, easy. However, if your collection has really shrunk, our middle school collections are pretty small, consider doing the whole collection every year. You'll clean up a whole lot of mistakes. You'll know exactly what you have. Keep your loss list manageable like David's is, with only, 1 year's worth of lost stuff. And your statistics will be really accurate. And it's not that difficult if your collection's only, 7,000 items, 10,000 items. Consider it. If you have a clerk, if you have help, it can be really valuable to do it every year. But that aside, the rule is 1/3. But 1/3 doesn't mean that you do your 25 biographies every year, over and over and over. Okay, that's not 1/3. It needs to be a significant third. It needs to be 1/3 that the kids are using where you're going to clean up problems, not doing the professional collection with 3 shelves of professional books that have dust on that nobody checks out. Make it a significant portion of your collection so it's improving something in your statistics. It helps you know whether to buy copies of something, because Tidal Wave, it syncs your collection. You can sync your collection with a variety of other vendors, Mackin, several others. You can export your Destiny collection and give it to them, and then when you do ordering with their online tool, it'll say, you already have this title. So there's a lot of reasons to keep the inventory and the collection cleaned up. I think I've run over time because I'm blathering on.
We have, but we started a little bit late. We're at 3:10 now.
So how many people have bailed ship because Holly didn't shut up?
We've only lost a couple.
Okay. All right, so let's see what else we have on here. Maybe we can...
It's really just submitting your collection to Mackin and to TitleWise, and I will post those slides. We do have upcoming PD. If you have not registered already, Friday's PD at Palm Beach Gardens High School should be amazing. We are so lucky to be having Tanya Alvarez come. Even if you've used Adobe Spark before, please come. It's going to be a wonderful day of learning for us and to bring it back to our kids. March 17th, this class is now live in e-learning. It's going to be a collaboration between EdTech and the SMART team. It's called Getting Smarter in Your Media Center. Use keyword SMART to locate the class of e-learning and register. I sent out a Google form today asking what kinds of smart things you would like to know about, so we can tailor the workshop especially to you.
So this is taking, the use of your smartboard to the next level. We're having one of the trainers from Smart half a day, and Rebecca Schmeckla and Tasha Pert, who are part of the team, support team for the Smart panels for the district, are going to talk about the Google apps and using them with a smartboard. So it's going to be a very informative session, and we hope you'll come. Reminder about Jim Harbin. These will be in the slides when she exports them. April 3rd is the deadline. There's our tags again. And here's registration. As always, be sure you signed in the Google form. We have to have proof of attendance, so click that Google form. It'll stay open for 10 minutes after we close the webinar. And here's the follow-up, and I'll leave this sit on here while everybody exits. Any other questions that we can answer? Pop your microphone open and holler at us, or
chat us.
Chat us.
Jennifer, Holly and I will call you when it's over to answer your inventory questions. Do not freak out. We will help you through it. Please don't freak out. It's a lot the first time you do it. It's all good. If there's no other questions, we will sign off. Can you run me through what a batch update is?
You know what? Why don't we do that over the phone, Alonzo? It's basically an update copies, and it's updating a large portion at once. That's for changing the cert type or the sublocation of copies. And you, I think, are type yes or no in the chat. Aren't you genrifying your fiction?
Soon.
Soon. See, let's talk it over, because that's what you'll use. You'll use batch update on the sublocation to create those genre areas.
Alonzo had the same problem as Debbie. Some of the ebooks.
That batch update. Yeah. Okay, if you need to know how to batch update your ebooks, send me an email and I will send you the directions. It's a two-step process. You run a report and then you upload the barcodes into a TXT file and do it in batch update. I'll send those to you too. That may be what Alonzo was talking about, that batch update.
I think it's that batch update, because he typed earlier that he had an issue with his inventory. He got all the way through fiction and
there was a lot missing.
And the ebooks were left selected.
Okay. You can even give me a call this afternoon, Alonzo, if you want. We'll walk through that. I think you're on campus till 4, maybe?
Yep. All right. If there's no other questions, we will go ahead and sign off. Just hit escape. We can. Oh, our next Topical Tuesday before you all leave is March 10th, and it's going to be Update Your TV Studio on a Shoestring Budget. And Chad Smith at Roosevelt Middle will be our guest presenter. Be sure to tune in for that if you are trying to update your TV studio.
All righty, bye everybody.
Bye everyone. Just click the video recorder at the bottom. It's next to Google.
This one?
Yeah. Nope, other one.
Oh. I'll get this in a second.
This, yep. And then click stop.